Sean.
Marco.
We are here to deliver a message from the RSA conference team.
It's an important message from our friends. RSA Conference 2025, just around the corner, where insights drive action, solutions emerge, and community connections spark innovation. You'll be there. I'll be there. We invite everybody else to be there April 28th through May 1st. You can secure your spot at rsaconference.com/ITSPMAG25. That's ITSPMAG25. See you all there.
I'll be there. See you there. Hey, Sean, do you know what? I think that our listeners want real protection against cyber risk, and I know that iTrust is the leader in cybersecurity assurance. But what makes them the go-to choice?
Well, according to our friends at HITRUST, because their framework covers 100% of the known tactics, techniques, and procedures, in 2024, organizations with a HITRUST certification had just a 0.59 incident rate, meaning 99.41% stayed breach-free.
Wow, that's solid. But what about staying sharp over time?
HITRUST regular certification process isn't just a checkbox, it actually drives improvement. Repeat customers see up to 54% fewer corrective actions needed year over year. And now with our new AI security assessment and certification, you can actually tackle AI risk with confidence as well.
That's great. So check out itrust.com to learn more. It is the framework of all frameworks. I'm not here, Sean.
He's like, I've seen videos where people slide in onto the scene.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not talking about a movie where that happens, but there's a guitarist, Kiki Wong.
Oh,
slides in.
yeah. She's with Smashing Pumpkins.
You
she kicks some ass.
Exactly. we trying to mimic that slide into the.
Oh, I could never do that, especially if you ask me to
she's
riff
really
on the guitar like that.
and her guitar playing is off the charts. Great
exactly.
As well. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, Smashing Pumpkins puts out vinyl too. But which is what we're here to talk about. Vinyl, the resurgence of an amazing technology. And one might think they see me, is it cybersecurity? They see Marco, is it society? They see the two of us together. Is it music, or are we on location? If they're watching, they'll know it's on location because the screen says it. But we're here to talk about an event that our good friend Larry puts together with a team of folks called Making Vinyl. And it's all about the process of making vinyl and enjoying it. And Larry's been on my show, so I'm going to encourage everybody to listen to that episode where we talked a little bit about that. But today is all about the event. And Larry Jaffee brought Kevin Da Costa with him, who's been at the event as well. And I'm going to let each of them introduce themselves. Larry, you first, or host and organizer of Making Vinyl. Tell us a little bit about who you are and what's going on.
Sure. Well, I'm Larry Jaffee. I'm the co-founder and conference director of Making Vinyl, which we started in 2017. I grew up with vinyl, went through the whole CD era, realized in 2010, in a moment of madness, I sold.
This is a sad story, Larry. You're going to tell the story?
Well, I sold my collection in a moment of madness, 4,000 LPs. Then I spent the next 12 years reassembling it to its former glory, which as
I don't know which is
more
sad.
In my apartment. So I'm trying to figure out what I'm going to do with it all. But around 2017 or so, the opportunity came. I had pitched the concept of Making Vinyl earlier, about 3 years earlier, to Brian Ekus, my co-founder. He and I had collaborated on conferences in the physical media space for many years. We also did some things together. Well, he was more focused on the Solar Energy Association, which Kevin has actually also, not so much on the association, but I've been working in as well. But I realized how much I missed vinyl, and what a major mistake I made. And when the time seemed right, Brian actually said, Remember that idea you had about doing a conference? This was around March of 2017. So I said, yeah. So he says, well, we're going to do it this year. I was like, really? I mean, I was completely surprised. So I said, when? He said, well, this fall. Um, and, as a result, I mean, the planets sort of lined up, and we had no idea what we really were getting into. We just had a hunch that the timing might be right. And I have to say, it is probably my proudest moment in my career, standing in back of the room with a full, ballroom. I was like, hey, we pulled this off. And then not only that, we got Jack White to be our keynote, and that, you have the globe in front of
Two
you.
feathers, two feathers
Right.
in that cap.
I mean,
I think we have photos we can share for those too. So we'll
yeah,
do
and
that.
Jack actually flew from LA to be in Detroit with us. He was on a book tour. He was doing a kids book tour. But what was really, and it's funny, I'm wearing a T-shirt at Third Man Pressing, that I bought actually at Third Man Pressing. This basically shows the many steps of vinyl production. And Sean, you mentioned the process of making vinyl. I can't think of anyone better than Kevin Da Costa, who's been a featured speaker at our events. Probably, Kevin, what was it, since 2022?
Yeah,
When was it?
yeah, for a few years. 2022
Yeah,
is the first year I came. Yeah.
yeah. And he and I became fast friends, and then we, are collaborating on a, exciting project in Iceland. So, but you asked about the technical aspects of it, and I'm more of a layperson in terms of my knowledge. I'm not an engineer, unlike Kevin. Um, and I guess unlike both of you, I guess both came from the cyber engineering side of things, right? Programming. I'm more of a words person. I sort of synthesize the information and try to explain it to people who also are not engineers. Um, I think it pretty much works out. Um,
Absolutely.
Well, I don't come from that background myself, but
I dragged you in.
I got dragged in by Sean. But that's a story for another podcast, I guess.
okay.
But I am always been interested in technology and obviously always loved music. And as a matter of fact, this couldn't be any more perfect for us. Not only Sean mentioned he launched the show. I have the storytelling one where taught to musician as well that they tell story through music. Obviously that's storytelling as well. Jack White's definitely one of those that does it very, very well. And I just love vinyl myself. And I know we're here to talk about the event, but one of the things that I am curious is maybe few years ago, and I don't know, Kevin could probably jump on this one, is the fact that record and vinyl were coming back, I had a question mark. Like, it's vinyl coming back? Question mark. Because it looked like it was. Now, I think it's not a question mark anymore. The industry had picked up. I've seen some crazy album done. They're definitely not cheap, but it's kind of interesting that there is a creative aspect to it, even in the production as well. So, Kevin, it's official. I mean, vinyl is back.
Well, it's a nice thing to reflect on because I sort of forced my way into the industry as an engineer with no creative skills at all, but just a complete passion and love of the format of records. I've been collecting records and obsessed by records since I was a child, really, and never stopped buying records. So I was one of those that kept buying records even when they were harder to get. All those albums from the 80s and 90s that weren't really issued on record or perhaps were harder to get. But myself, which is kind of anecdotal evidence, is I'm of an age now that I've got nieces and nephews and I've got a son, and kind of magically in around maybe the 2010s, I seem to notice that my nieces and nephews were getting into records, and it didn't seem to make any sense in the context of downloading and streaming. I was like, why? And they just loved the format. They're like, okay, I want to have something that brings me closer to the artist that I love. For some people it might be a T-shirt, for others it's a record. The crazy thing is some of the people in my sort of community, my cousins and nieces and nephews, they one or two of them don't even own a record player, but they were buying records all of a sudden. And now they've graduated and they are have a record player and they enjoy that moment of stepping out of the rat race for maybe half an hour and putting a record on, because it takes work, a little bit of effort. It forces you to not be passive in your engagement with music. So I kind of started to reappreciate not just the format, but why we listen to records in the first place. And that seemed to correlate with, okay, I was anecdotally seeing people in, my circle getting into records, and people that had sold their record collection in the 90s starting to regret that and starting to rebuild it. So you sort of started to see these signs. And I'd always, as an engineer, I'd always thought, okay, can I do anything about getting into this industry at all as an engineer? And that's where I came from. I'd been working at Tesla as an engineer. I started to read a lot more about, the Record Store Day, which of course Larry literally wrote the book on. And I started to go to Record Store Day. I started to see people buy more records. I started to see reissues of records that I couldn't get in the 90s because no one had made enough records or didn't issue it. And I thought, I've got to try it. So I forced my way into the industry as an engineer, thinking, okay, what can I do? And the thing that I could do, and the thing that, I still do, is there was a shortage of record presses. So suddenly you had this scenario where more and more people were buying records. But during the 80s and the 90s and early 2000s, lots of record factories around the world had shut down. So we hit this sort of situation where there wasn't enough capacity in the world to actually make the records for the new demand that was growing year on year. And so a few companies started up to make the presses to provide the capacity. And you started to see a lot of new factories start up. So you had this sort of situation where not enough capacity, a few dominant large companies like your GZ Medias and RTIs in America. But suddenly, because these new presses started to be available, you started to see small, independent, small-scale manufacturers started to pop up all over the world, predominantly Europe and America, with one press, two presses, three or four presses maybe, learning the job as they went, brutal entry into the industry, figuring out how to make records. Because Larry, he says he's not a technician, but he's learned enough about making records at this point to also empathize with and understand that it's beyond the mechanical process. It becomes an artisanal process to make a record. There's so many variables to get a good quality record that after you learn the basic mechanical process, it then becomes an art form, because literally every record is different. The groove pattern of every record is different. That necessitates a different application of variables, materials, and the infrastructure. So I can say anecdotally, I've seen it in my own circle, but now we have the evidence. It feels like records aren't going away. You should argue that records are obsolete. They're inconvenient. They cost too much money. They take too long to make. But we love them, and it's not just older record buyers like me. Young people are loving these records, and the interesting thing for me is the demographics. The biggest single buyer of records by demographic is 15 to 35. That's crazy, but beautiful as well.
Well, we have Taylor
I know.
Swift.
I buy a lot of records. No, I'm not in that range.
So, I mean, I know that we have to hold ourselves from going deep into this, and I just love talk about this. I have a few records here myself. So it's complex. There is a lot of aspect. That's why a conference on how and all about the process of making record make sense. So, Larry, tell us a little bit about what happened at this conference.
Okay, so what we had known that there were 35 existing record plants in 2017, and half of them agreed to speak on panels, and those were two panels. One was like the large global type companies that had been in existence for more than 25 years or so. There were a few in the U.S. and a few in Europe that fit that category. Probably about a half dozen of those companies, and then the rest of them were startups in the past 5 years. What we didn't know was that in the audience there were 20 companies on the verge of opening, and then the same thing happened the next year. We went back to Detroit, and there were probably more than 20 on the verge of opening. And it's to the point that now there's almost 200 pressing plants globally. And Kevin Consulting Services actually has helped get them going, and they learned how to operate a plant and get their machines pressing.
So let me ask you this, and Larry, I'm sure you've been to NAMM. Kevin, I don't know if you've been to NAMM, but because Kevin, you spoke to the artistry, and you didn't say passion, but I'm assuming there's a passion in that goes into creating albums, not the music that goes on, the actual creation of the album as well.
Yeah.
And that form, and at NAMM, you could feel that passion, and I'm wondering, Larry and Kevin, do you have that same sense of drive and holding on to what vinyl means at the Making Vinyl conference?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's so many things to mention here, but I'll start with this. What's really amazing and I think really, really powerful and beautiful is the people that have come into the industry. So if you imagine, again, through the 80s, 90s, lots of factories closed down. And what went with it was lots of experience. People who have been making records for a lot of time and knew how to do it, knew the art. And a lot of those people retired, left the industry, moved on. So when this revival happens and new factories are popping up, almost always it was people who came from a real place of passion for the art, for the medium, for both music, oh yes, of course, but also specifically for records. And very often you see new factories that have someone in it that comes from maybe a record label, maybe they're an artist themselves, a creator or creative in some form, and they just want to figure out how to make records. And hopefully they team up with someone with some maybe manufacturing or technical background, but often not. So they're learning in real time, making all the mistakes, but getting better. Ironically, that's kind of helped me to have somewhat of a job because I'm able to help with the technical side. But definitely, nearly every single one of these have come to this industry from a place of passion, not thinking this was a fast buck. Because let me tell you, unfortunately, it isn't a fast buck, but it is something that, if you get right, can be extremely rewarding, almost spiritually more than economically. If you get it maths right, it works as a business, but it's not Bitcoin. It's 30% sort of margin. It's an average business return, but people are so driven to make the best quality records, to enjoy the format. It's something you can really be proud of. When you've made records all day, you can look at the shelves and you know that you've made 1,000 records that becomes your legacy. You have a small part in the legacy of a record. That's a really wonderful thing, because we know with records that they don't really end up in the trash. They get regifted or passed on, inherited, sold, shared. Very rarely does a record actually end up in the trash. And we love the format so much. There's a home for every record, even if it's not your taste. Someone out there, it's like a partner. There's someone out there for everyone. It's a bit like that record. There's an audience for every single record. I like to think so. And certainly the people that have come into
Wow.
the industry have that sort of attitude. So there's a genuine passion in this manufacturing process, the industry, that you don't find in any other industry, I think. And I absolutely love that, and I'm just feel extraordinarily privileged to be part of it.
And one thing I'd just like to mention is that when we first started making vinyl, I would say about half the audience were manufacturers in the CD space, and they saw the decline, the rapid decline, since Napster, and they wanted to stay in the business. On the other hand, I know plenty of like very talented people who, like, I was thinking one art director in particular who I heard was working for car companies now instead, doing advertising for them instead of like designing album covers, which is a really big shame. On the other hand, it did create new opportunities for newcomers. For the same reason, like I think my daughter's the perfect example. She's 27. She's an old soul in a way, as Kevin was saying about his nieces and nephews. That my daughter has, she loves Ella Fitzgerald, Ray Charles. I mean, and I have somebody who can inherit my collection. And obviously I've got to give her very, precise instructions what to do with it. I better start working on it soon.
Well, there is definitely a lot of passion. I mean, Kevin, the way you talk about the record industry, your passion for it, and Larry, of course, I already knew that. It's hard not to share it. Also, it's pretty easy to. It's an open door already here with Sean and I. But for the people listening, and as we wrap this quick conversation about the event, tell us when the event take place and who is going to be attending and who should be attending. So little sell pitch for the event.
Yeah, it's June 2nd to the 4th in Memphis, the Resonant Convention Center, which is in downtown Memphis. It is attended by people all along that value chain of what it takes to put out a record. It's a B2B conference. It's really not for consumers. And it's an expensive, as far as business conferences go. And we're still probably less money than a cybersecurity conference, in fact. And Sean, thank you for giving me a contact for someone, a cyber expert. So for the first time, we're actually going to have a panel on how to ward off a cyber attack, which, because it's become a very competitive industry, and we know that there's some nefarious parties in other parts of the world, they will, one, grab your masters, they will grab your customer list, they will, they can mess up your operations very easily. So that was an opportunity. That was an example of a side of the business that we had not really covered. So in addition, who comes? It's not only the pressing plants and the people who sell consumables, such as the pellets that go into the making of the records. It's also the labels, the copyright owners. We do get more and more artists coming. And, as I said, the designers, anyone along that chain, and we get some retailers talking about it. And, it's interesting. The vertical integration is pretty interesting these days. I mean, retail stores now, signing local bands and putting out the records or live at that record store. Yeah.
Well, I was going to ask this. There's a couple of tracks that really speak to me, but I wanted to. You mentioned the artist, and I'm wondering, both of you, if you have insights on this, because making money as an artist is hard, and I'm wondering if vinyl is an avenue where you can control some creativity and work perhaps directly with a pressing organization and create items that can generate revenue for you? Because I know one of the topics is sales and marketing, right? There's a master class there, and so I'm just wondering, is this a way for artists to actually find new avenues for?
Well, it is, but it also depends on what type of contract they have. If they're signed to a major label, there might be some restrictions, so they should really go eyes wide open, because by the time that they get whatever percent is theirs from vinyl sales, they might have to wait a very long time for it.
I'm
Whereas,
thinking the new artist who's not signed,
right, okay, so
and maybe there's a way to
they
actually
have an
over streaming where you make pennies, right?
right. They have an opportunity to make a large, healthy profit, like 50%. Say they sell the record for $25. It's only costing them $12 to usually, or even less, depending on the quantity, that they can. There's economies of scale. But most young artists are only going to buy 500 copies, maybe 1,000 at the most. But it's going to last them a while to get rid of them. But like I said, no, I think no one goes on the streaming services expecting to make money. And Spotify, there's like a controversy on LinkedIn I was reading this morning that they're a little defensive about it, and they say, well, wait a second, we don't pay the artist directly. It's the labels, the copyright owners who we pay. And there's some dissension. Well, that's not, so why do you have all these lobbyists protecting your interests, if that's the case, making sure that musicians and artists are not trying to grab a piece of the pie. But I think streaming from a music discovery standpoint is a great thing. And if I just bought a record the other day by the singer-songwriter Laura Veers, who and I scanned all of her records, and then I found the one which happened to be one of her earlier ones that I liked the best, and I was like, I'm gonna get this album on vinyl. So I think there's a coexistence that does exist, and it's not either or. And Sean, in your opening, you were saying that the expense, or Kevin, you were saying about how expensive the records are. I teach college students, and about half dozen of them already have vinyl collections to some extent out of 20. But what I hear is more would do it if it wasn't so expensive. So what I say to them is, well, go to a used record store and there's plenty of them that sell, for $1 or $2. You can be amazed if you want to.
Depend what you're looking for.
Right. Well,
some they're like 200 or 300.
You need a lot of patience. I love record fairs for that purpose.
Oh, that's a treasure. That's a treasure hunt. In LA, sometimes I go to the Hollywood Bowl, not to the Hollywood, to the Rose Bowl, where they have once a month they have the fair with all the antiques and people selling all the stuff. And the only reason why I go is to go and go look for that album that it's unknown that they have it. And maybe I always think I'm gonna find the really cool one.
Is that where you got Mary Poppins?
That's where I got Mary Poppins with the signatures. Yes, I did.
I actually contribute to a magazine called Record Collector News in Southern LA. Jim Kaplan's the publisher. He's a friend of mine. And he and I we met at a record fair, actually, after being pen pals for a while.
Yeah, it's a pretty big thing.
Yeah,
for sure. Well, this is exciting. Sean, you have any more questions? I have a ton, but I know it's not the place right now.
I know Kevin wants to say something. I'll let Kevin say something.
Thank you, guys. Yeah, I just wanted to share something really amazing, which is to do with the manufacture of records. What I've seen, I've been in a privileged position to help people design and build their record factories around the world for the last few years now. And what I've seen is new record factories start up in completely new areas. The last year, I commissioned the first factory in India for 40 years. This year, hopefully, we're going to open the first factory in the whole continent of Africa. for more than 25 years. We're going to be opening one in Azerbaijan in a few months. The first one in Bulgaria, in the Balkan region, for many years. So what we're seeing is not just more records being made, but more records being made from completely underserved new territories and regions around the world. And the interesting thing I think, and the beautiful thing I think about that is not just more capacity, is that we're much more likely to see really interesting records, vinyl records, with new music and archival music that's not underserved from those regions, because they're in that locality. They will be producing music from those regions. So not only are we seeing more records, we're seeing a greater diversity of music come to the fore and be available to people. And I just think that's, for me, it's inspiring. And a lot of those I encourage, and they come to Making Vinyl because they get to meet other people from around the world, share their stories, share their experience, and learn from each other. And that's the beautiful thing about Making Vinyl.
Yeah,
I love it.
I love it.
Sean, you know what?
I can see the connection to the new artists having new music, sharing it to the people around them who can appreciate it, right?
Yeah, Sean, I'm gonna skip Info Security London and actually go to this event.
I know.
Or Larry, you guys have to move it for me so that I can actually come. I wish I didn't have that.
It's an unfortunate thing this year that they're overlapping, but
I know. Hopefully next year.
We're grateful to have this conversation, and hopefully the schedules will align better. There's a ton of tracks. I mean, supply chain is another, power connection. There's a whole quality thing and the tech aspect of it that always excites me as well. Hopefully, Kevin, you'll come back on my show, Music Evolves, and maybe we can have a conversation around the process of pressing and all that.
Well, I'd love to. I mean, perhaps we'll save this for another time, but there's a lot of innovation happening within records. I myself are working on a plant-based alternative to PVC for records. I'm here in Germany right now testing the latest variation. It sounds amazing. Still some ways to go. And that's actually ended up with resulting in myself and Larry working together with a couple of other colleagues, Gumi and JB, on producing, hopefully, what will become the world's most sustainable record factory in Iceland. Because there is demand from the market to want to have more sustainability in the things that we love. And it's music, right? So we want to do that more sustainably. So that's one. There's innovations around Web3 technology with smart vinyl, enhancing the vinyl experience, So there is lots of innovation happening. It's a 70, 80, 90, 100-year-old technology, you could argue. But that doesn't mean there can't be and are really interesting, exciting innovations. And that's a whole nother subject we'd love to chat to you about one day. But thank you so much.
Yeah. Fantastic.
Nope.
Yeah, I'll pre-name that episode "Turning the Grooves to 11." How's that?
Awesome.
Larry, final word from you. The dates, location again, and it's makingvinyl.com. And of course, we'll put links in, and we have some photos from Larry from the event that we'll share as well. Larry, final call for folks to join you.
Yeah, so it's June 2nd to the 4th in Memphis at the Memphis Convention Center. There are plenty of hotels in the vicinity there. It's really rich in terms of music history. I mean, I even got back my old Elvis VHS 56, and
Nice.
Reading all about Sam Phillips. I confirmed Sam's son Jerry Phillips, who put out his first record last year. And he's going to tell us about that. And he's still working the studio to some extent. So he's a storyteller. I mean, as many Southerners. So
there's always a story there. There's always a story there.
There's always a story.
Yes. Well, there'll be plenty of them at Making Vinyl, makingvinyl.com. Larry, Kevin, fantastic chatting with you today. Congrats on bringing together this topic and then the people who are passionate about it. And more chats coming to you on this topic, and more music from me, more stories from Marco, and of course together on location with Sean and Marco as we hit different events that inspire us and make us think and connect with each other. So thank you both. Thanks everybody for listening, watching. Please do subscribe and share with your friends, and we'll see you on the next one.
Thank you, guys. Wonderful.
Thank you.
Sean,
Marco.
we are here to deliver a message from the RSA conference team.
It's an important message from our friends. RSA Conference 2025, just around the corner, where insights drive action, solutions emerge, and community connections spark innovation. You'll be there. I'll be there. We invite everybody else to be there April 28th through May 1st. You can secure your spot at rsaconference.com/ITSPMAG25. That's ITSPMAG25. See you all there.
I'll be there. See you there. Hey, Sean, do you know what? I think that our listeners want real protection against cyber risk, and I know that iTrust is the leader in cybersecurity assurance. But what makes them the go-to choice?
Well, according to our friends at HITRUST, because their framework covers 100% of the known tactics, techniques, and procedures, in 2024, organizations with a HITRUST certification had just a 0.59 incident rate, meaning 99.41% stayed breach-free.
Wow, that's solid. But what about staying sharp over time?
HITRUST regular certification process isn't just a checkbox, it actually drives improvement. Repeat customers see up to 54% fewer corrective actions needed year over year. And now with our new AI security assessment and certification, you can actually tackle AI risk with confidence as well.
That's great. So check out itrust.com to learn more. It is the framework of all frameworks.